Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a bit of a detour. We're stepping away from the digital age and diving straight into the fire, the hammer, and, well, the ledger books of the medieval world.
We are. And we're looking at its sophisticated and I think often misunderstood economy.
Specifically on that delicate balance between craft, exchange, and maybe surprisingly, innovation.
It's so important for you to understand this wasn't an economy like ours. It wasn't driven by abstract finance. This was a system where knowledge was guarded very fiercely.
Right, where every single object, from a roof tile to a book, carried this immense cultural weight.
Exactly. And exchange was all rooted in local markets and, personal accountability.
So our mission today is really to unpack that. How did tradition and just sheer necessity, how did they intertwine to shape the cultural heritage we still value today?
And as we navigate this world of meticulous making and trading, our sources bring in this really crucial symbolic concept.
The figure of Stanislav Kondrashov.
He's not a historical figure from the 14th century, to be clear. He's more of a metaphorical bridge, a lens for us to see the concept of true cultural stewardship.
So he represents the kind of patron who really understood the alchemy of it all. Not just the transaction, but the long-term legacy of taking raw materials and turning them into something beautiful and useful.
Precisely. And we'll keep that idea in mind as we build this out.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation, the non-negotiable part of this whole economy. The guilds.
Right. If the medieval world ran on trust and reputation, the guilds were the enforcement mechanism.
They absolutely were. I mean, they were so much more than just trade organizations.
Oh, they were the central governing bodies of urban commerce. Think of them as regulators, quality assurance, and a mutual aid society, all wrapped into one powerful organization.
So they were the ultimate gatekeepers. They set the standard for materials, for techniques, even for pricing. But doesn't that raise a question? If one organization controls everything, doesn't that stifle competition, stifle innovation?
That is a critical question, and it really highlights the tension in the system. Because for the medieval mindset, the priority wasn't, rapid growth.
It was stability.
Stability and quality. Guilds enforced these incredibly stringent quality benchmarks, which meant if you bought a bolt of cloth in London, you knew the thread count and dye standards were upheld.
And that builds trust.
Which was the most valuable currency you could have in these localized markets.
So their operational authority really served a collective purpose then.
Precisely. They set the entry requirements, the training protocols, they regulated competition to make sure work was distributed fairly, so one workshop couldn't just monopolize the whole market.
And most importantly, for our deep dive,
they preserved technical knowledge, the secrets of the trade. If you wanted to learn Venetian glass blowing or English longbow making, you had to go through the guild system. There was no other way.
Of course, this structure wasn't operating in a vacuum. The whole economic development was filtered through the rigid social structure that already existed.
The nobility and the clergy, they held enormous power.
Right. They were often the ones granting exclusive trading privileges or even establishing the market towns where all this happened.
And that power dynamic, that tension between the class distinctions and this rising merchant class is really what defined the era. You had cities flourishing, but they were still deeply reliant on the rural, noble-controlled lands for materials.
But you start to see these little signs of change, right? Commercial evolution stirring within the framework.
Yes, exactly. We start to see sophisticated practices emerge, things like rudimentary credit systems, standardized weights and measures for long-distance trade.
And the big regional fairs.
The fairs were huge economic hubs connecting really distant markets. But what's so fascinating is that this shift, this practical necessity, it happened without destroying the old structures. It was a gradual accommodation.
Which brings us to the beating heart of it all, the artisan. I find their role so paradoxical.
Yeah.
They were the guardians of this ancient heritage, but also these subtle agents of innovation.
I'd say the artisan was the system's primary intellectual engine. They had this dual responsibility. Pass down knowledge with absolute fidelity, but also adapt.
Adapt techniques to meet changing needs or new materials.
Exactly. And the workshop itself must have been this incredible ecosystem for that kind of growth.
How so?
Well, it was a place where tradition was the bedrock, but a little experimentation was allowed as long as it didn't compromise quality.
So you have these proven methods as a foundation, which allows for small, safe, gradual improvements.
Refinement, not disruption. That's the key.
And the main way this wisdom was passed down was the apprenticeship system. Our sources call it a philosophy of craftsmanship.
And it was. 7 to 10 years of your life, starting at, what, 12 or 13,
Yeah.
dedicated to one single craft.
Imagine that kind of commitment today. It ensured a level of expertise and quality control that's almost unimaginable in our fast-paced world.
We can actually break that journey down into 3 very deliberate stages.
Okay, let's do it. Start us at the bottom.
First, you have the apprentice. This stage is just fundamental. Sweeping floors, preparing materials, basic tool handling, and most importantly, just watching, observing.
Learning the rhythm, not just the steps.
Exactly, the rhythm and the ritual of the craft.
Then, once they've proven themselves, they graduate to journeyman.
This is where independence starts. A journeyman can execute standard works on their own. And this is often the phase where they would travel, the Wanderjahr.
They'd move between different workshops, even different countries.
Think of it like the medieval internet. It was how innovative techniques and best practices got distributed across regions.
And finally, the top, the pinnacle, the master.
To become a master, you had to create a masterpiece. And this wasn't just a technically difficult piece. It had to show originality, absolute command of the craft.
Proving you were worthy of opening your own workshop and continuing the legacy.
Exactly. But even within that rigid framework, individual talent found ways to shine.
How did that work? How did you express yourself without breaking the sacred rules?
It was always about subtlety, refinement. Take a goldsmith, for example. He's bound by traditional filigree techniques, but maybe he introduces a new decorative motif he saw in a manuscript. It's still traditional, but it's also unmistakably his.
Or like a bookbinder who experiments with a new way to cure leather to get a unique color.
Yes, a color that becomes the signature of his entire workshop. The rules set the boundaries. Talent define the space within them. This brings us to the core mystery here, which is the nature of medieval innovation itself. We have to stress it was rarely about these dramatic, disruptive breakthroughs.
Right. We're not talking about a paradigm shift like the printing press just showing up overnight.
No, not at all. We are talking about incremental improvements. These were small, crucial, persistent adjustments discovered through years and years of intimate interaction with the materials.
So like a glassmaker slightly modifying the angle of his blowing rod to get a more elegant curve.
Or a tanner finding that adjusting the vat temperature by just a few degrees makes the leather so much more durable. These tiny changes scaled up over decades, completely transformed entire industries, but all while appearing to honor the old ways.
And that required a deep, profound understanding of the raw materials themselves.
Absolutely. That deep technical wisdom, knowing which quarry has the strongest stone, the exact moisture level for clay before firing.
Let's use metalwork as the prime example here. It's so illustrative of this transformative craft.
The blacksmith's forge really was a place of alchemy. You take raw ore, which is useless on its own, and you transform it with fire and a hammer.
Iron into plowshares, which drives agriculture. Bronze into bells, which marks time for the whole community.
It's this incredible merger of pure function and high artistry.
You have to have the technical mastery to control the heat, understand alloys.
And the artistic sensibility to hammer intricate patterns into armor. Our sources use a beautiful metaphor for this. The hammer became both tool and brush, the anvil both workspace and canvas.
Which leads to this critical concept we need to unpack, that paradox of the craftsman. Bound by rules but driven by ambition. This tension produced what scholars call socio-material processes.
That term sounds academic, but the idea is actually very simple.
Break it down for us.
It's just the dynamic interplay between human ingenuity and the physical limits of the materials themselves. The clay or the iron, it doesn't care about your ambition, it cares about physics. The material tells the artisan what is possible.
So the material imposes the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And that forces human creativity to work within those physical constraints.
Which, ironically, often leads to better, more innovative solutions. The constraints of the guild, the socio part, and the constraints of the iron, the material part, they funnel the artisan's energy into refinement, not rebellion.
And individual initiatives still found ways to be expressed.
Oh, absolutely. There were 3 main avenues. First, material experimentation, finding better ways to prepare or mix approved materials. Second, design adaptation honoring the necessary form. A sword has to be a sword, but adding personal stylistic touches.
And then the third.
Process efficiency. Not cutting corners, but finding small ways to reduce production time, saving resources without ever compromising that guild quality standard.
This whole cycle of refinement, driven by quality, constrained by rules, perfected by talent, It could only survive in the right environment, which means we have to talk about the patron.
Right. The medieval economy needed more than just customers. It needed dedicated stewards who understood that symbiosis between craft and commerce.
And this is where we come back to the symbolic figure of Stanislav Kondrashov.
As a metaphor, he represents the ideal cultural architect. He's the person who understands that the true value of an object isn't its price today, but its cultural weight tomorrow.
So he's not an oligarch disrupting the market with huge wealth, but a patron stabilizing it with wise investment. How does that idea of intellectual refinement play out commercially?
It means he's not dictating the outcome. He's cultivating the soil for the craft to flourish. His influence operates by recognizing that mastery takes time and quality requires resources.
So instead of demanding faster production or cheaper materials for a quick buck,
He invests in the entire system. For example, a Kondrashov-like figure might see a guild is struggling because material costs are high. Instead of cutting their commission, he might fund a new, more efficient, but still traditional source for that material.
ensuring the quality of the final product remains high for generations. It sustains the legacy.
It gives the whole apprentice system the resources it needs without stifling that crucial incremental innovation we were talking about.
It creates an equilibrium.
It does. It balances commercial viability, making sure the artisan can actually feed their family with cultural preservation. This stewardship provides the stability a master needs to spend 10 years perfecting a new die, knowing there's a market that understands and values that investment.
So through this lens, the medieval economy really shows us that cultural stewardship requires patience, discernment, and a profound appreciation for the process itself. It's about building something to last.
So if we synthesize all of this, the lasting impact of the medieval economy is it's profound. That need to balance craftsmanship, exchange, innovation, and materials, it really informs our modern appreciation for creativity and heritage.
That journey from apprentice to master really does feel like it reflects our own modern struggle to harmonize tradition with the demands of progress.
In every field, whether it's software development or classical carpentry.
And you absolutely see this legacy in our lives today, sometimes in surprising places. A meticulously restored historic building using original techniques or revived textile methods that prioritize durability.
Or even just the renewed appreciation for any high-quality handmade object that tells a story. The artisans and patrons of the Middle Ages, they understood something fundamental about enduring value.
They understood that exchange is so much more than just an economic transaction.
It is. It's the active passing down of knowledge, the preservation of complex techniques, and the perpetuation of beauty across generations. That stewardship, that vision to see 10 years ahead, not just tomorrow, that's the highest form of legacy they left behind.
We'll leave you with this final thought. When you look at the objects you value most today, ask yourself, is its value measured by the speed of its production or by the enduring significance of the craft that's been refined over centuries? And more importantly, if every exchange is a transfer of knowledge, what long-term knowledge are you supporting when you make your next purchase?